Hey everybody, Mike Toy Bonsai Boise. This is my Ficus Fusion. I've got a lot of them, but this is my oldest one and my biggest one. So I've got about 4 years worth of progress that I'm going to show, and then we're going to take the tape off at the bottom and see how it's doing on its fusion. So let's go. Okay, so here's how it looks today. We're going to dive into that here in a minute, but first, come back in time. May 2019. It started as just 3 Ficus Benjamina cuttings that I braided together. I'm not sure what made me decide to braid them like that, but I've seen it done with other trees, money trees and that type of thing when you go to the store. And now that I think about it, I've seen it with ficus as well, and Scheffleris in different stores. So I think that's why I did it. I somehow got the bright idea to use electrical tape. My thinking at the time being that, it's stretchy, but yet holds firm. So it would allow the branches to fuse together without biting into the branches. Not the best material, and you'll see why here soon. So that's what it looked like. Fast forward about a year and a few months to the autumn of 2020, the big reveal. And this is why you don't use electrical tape. It just sort of tore off a lot of the bark along with it. They survived, but I'm sure that's not good. So there it is. One thing I'll give you a spoiler alert on is braiding these trees is not the best way to fuse them. I thought it would be. A lot of people have mentioned to me that it is. It's actually not. You have gaps everywhere. You can kind of see them right there. So you want as much surface touching as possible. So this time, I'm doing it backwards, so the sticky side is out, because I didn't really have a backup plan yet when I did this. It did not tear off the bark, but it was a lot harder to manage because dirt kept getting on there and sticking to it. Plus, look how ugly it is. So, electrical tape, not the best material. I'll try a few more materials here in a moment, you'll see. So fast forward to the following summer, June of 2021. Also, I'll point out, I really didn't work on structure too much at this point. I just kind of let it grow. I just focused on mostly just letting it grow and just trying to get it to fuse. So it didn't tear the bark off this time, so that's good. You can see it's starting to fuse there in a couple spots, so that's good. We're seeing progress. Keep in mind, it's been 2 years at this point. Also, I'll point out I experimented with a different type of soil mix that didn't go well. So this time I used grafting tape. Taped it up. Thought, okay, it's not very sticky. It's kind of meant for this sort of thing. So that's what I used. As you can see, that didn't work. I don't really know what happened. It just sort of disintegrated and fused onto the bark. Did not expect that to happen. This is later that fall/winter. So I did my best to clean it off. But while I'm in there, you can see it's starting to fuse more. There's still a lot of gaps in there, especially at the bottom. That's going to be a hard spot to get to fuse together because of those big wide gaps. But in other spots where the bark is touching, where there's contact, that's where it's fusing. So another reason not to braid trees. It's much better to use long, straight trunks and get as much surface contact as possible. This time I decided to use cotton, just kind of an old rag. I just really tore up an old rag and used that. Fast forward to April of 2022. The rag worked fine. It kind of looks trashy though, because I mean, A, it's just an old rag, and B, you're watering it and it's outside and dirt's blowing around. It gets dirty. It looks like a dirty old rag. So up to this point, I haven't found the winner yet, the winner solution. But a little more fusion. So we're making progress. Real quick, back to the soil mix. I experimented with this really organic, rich soil mix for a while, and it didn't go well. I tried it on here, and I think it just really slowed down the growth on this and every tree that I tried it on. So I figured it out at this point, and I repotted it into regular bonsai soil. So here what I'm trying, and this is just my own method, is rubber bands on sticks. Take the rubber bands, wrap it around, like so, then put a stick through it to hold it in place. My biggest concern doing this was that after some time outside, watering it and then the sun and then watering and the sun, the rubber bands would just break and snap. And in some cases they did. I did this on a few other trees too. But otherwise, in theory, it would work. The main thing I wanted to stay away from was wires. I didn't want to use wires because wires will cut into the trunks. Looking a little sparse. Had kind of a rough time in that old soil. We can see it's growing taller. Now here it is, November of 2022. So about, 6 months or so later, give or take. It really, really blew up in growth, which is great. Aerial roots everywhere. I did my clear plastic bag trick, which if you've seen my other videos, I do that a lot. I have a grow tent inside and I put a little clear plastic bag over it and keep it nice and humid. And it's like a mini greenhouse in a greenhouse. It's the best way to grow aerial roots that I've found. As you can see, those are the results. So the rubber band trick kind of worked. I was pleasantly surprised. You can see a lot of fusion happening there. Still not at the bottom. That's going to be a tough spot. And I'm trying to avoid sticking more cuttings in. I'll do that on some others. I have lots of these fusion things going, but this is the main one that I've been documenting, and I don't want to, I feel like I'm cheating if I stick more cuttings in. I'm just sticking with the main three. You can see even branches are fusing together. Up top there, like I didn't even try to fuse those. It just happened. Some of the aerial roots started wrapping around branches and then they would fuse. So that's kind of cool. Otherwise, it looks really messy though. That's the only downside of it here, is that it looked real messy. It basically had a bag over its head in a greenhouse for like 6 months. So, who wouldn't look messy after that? So here what I'm doing is it's getting real top heavy. I'm trimming it down, trying to push the growth downward, getting it to back bud down below, because I don't want it to be 6 feet tall. I still eventually want it to be a bonsai tree. So I'm getting rid of a lot of the top growth and trying to push that growth downward as much as I can. I decide to try a new method, and this has been my method ever since. See that gap there? A couple of them. Lots of fusion, but lots of gaps still. So we're not there yet, but we're getting there. Here's my new method. Teflon tape. Just regular old plumber's tape that you can get anywhere. It's like 50 cents a roll or something like that. That's worked like a charm. It's not sticky. It stretches a little, but it still holds it in place. That brings us back to present day. So here we are. Let's take a look inside here. We We do have some structural flaws, which is to be expected. But lots of fusion going. The main thing it's got going against it right now is these trunks or branches, you almost call them trunks, are just growing straight up. They're very thick and they're real close together. So we're gonna have to do something about that. You can see where a lot of them have just fused together. There's reverse taper. I knew that this would happen. I mean, that's what happens when you ignore all the structural things for so long. You can see where it's fused together there. I mean, you almost can't even see where it's fused together, really, unless you're really looking for it, which is good. That's what you want. You want it to just eventually look like one tree and not 3 trees. The aerial roots, a lot of them just dried up and died. Some of them made it down to the soil, and now they're much bigger and thicker, kind of add to the character. Still pretty messy though. There's a couple of cool little features. You might miss it if you're not looking for it. I found it and I'll show you here in a moment. This tree has an eye. You'll see it in a minute. But first, let's look at this trunk. You can see where it's really fused together real well. You can still tell that it was a braided tree, which is fine. But it's nothing near like what it was a couple years ago. Remember all those gaps that were everywhere? Most of those are just sort of filled in. I gotta say, now that I've had the experience with this, the good and the bad, I can do it a lot faster now. Number one thing is don't braid them, just long straight trunks with as much contact, as much surface contact as possible. That's key. So let's do the big reveal. One weird downside with this Teflon tape that I'm learning today is that I thought it would kind of just unravel like a mummy, like you see on TV and they're unraveling a mummy or something. But no, it doesn't do that. It sort of rips apart. So I decided to just cut it. There it is. It's alive. Most of the gaps are filled in. Even that root base or trunk base. There's still a couple gaps. If you're looking real close, you can see them. But I have a feeling they're going to fill in real quick. So I'm going to leave the Teflon tape off now. And I don't think there's any need for it at this point. They're not going anywhere, put it that way. They can't really grow apart at this point. So I think they'll just do the rest on their own. So now to address this tall, straight trunk issue. I mean, you can wire it or do all kinds of things, but here's just a little Mike toy trick. I don't know what to call this. I guess I'll call it the wedge. Take the end, bend it one way, then bend it back. Then do the same thing on the other end. And then you just wedge it in there. Typically you want to do it where there's, it's going to hook onto a branch or something and not slide off, but that's it. That way the wires don't bite into the branches or anything like that. You don't have to wire it all around. You just sort of wedge it in there and it does it. So that is sort of accomplishing what I wanted to accomplish. I wanted to spread those branches out so it's growing outward more than upward. There's Luna. She's my noble steed. She's fly hunting. She's running around chasing flies. She's a sheriff around here. She won't have it. Sorry, that was just a little doggy break there. Thought it was funny. Now, to do the same thing on this other side. Got another little wedge. There we go. It doesn't exactly look pretty right now, but we're getting it moving in the right direction. Now let's see if you can see the eye that I was talking about. It's kind of funny how it happened right there. The eye, the ever-watching eye, looking for the one ring. But it just sort of happened that way. The branches fused at the bottom and then they fused at the top, and it just has this one little weird eyeball gap right at the top, just like I'm going to show how nerdy I am, but it's like Sauron from Lord of the Rings. I don't know what to do about it. I guess I'll just let it go. Kind of a funny little feature. So I've got one more branch area that I needed to address over there. So this one, instead of a wedge, I'm going to do kind of like a guy wire. I have nothing to hook the guy wire to at the bottom. So I found a spot on the trunk and I'm just going to hook it to that, which I did off camera because I had to wrestle with it a little bit. You can kind of see it. It's copper wire, so it sort of blends in with the trunk, but you can see where I'm pulling it down to around the trunk right there. Not pretty, but it does the job. So there, now we've got the structure kind of flowing in a more bonsai-like direction. Now I'm going to give it just a little trim. I've trimmed it recently this summer, but I'm going to trim it again. And all I'm doing is I'm looking for little clusters of leaves where there's 5 or 6 leaves growing in one spot, taking it back to 1 or 2. The whole character of it is different now. I've got these branches sort of wedged out and spread out like that. So I'm going to go in sort of fast motion here and just sort of give it a little trimmy trim. Also, one trick I'll point out that I do with Ficus Benjamina in particular, in regards to old leaves, occasionally what will happen is you'll get this branch and you'll need the branch where it is, but it's got like one leaf on it and it's an old leaf. Ficus Benjamina, you typically can't defoliate a branch, let alone the tree. If you cut that one leaf off, the whole branch will die. So, now in addition to that, an old leaf will prevent new growth. So I just cut the old leaf in half. So as I'm going through trimming it, if I see an old leaf, if I can afford to get rid of it, I get rid of it. If not, I just cut it in half. And for whatever reason, that spawns new growth. So there it is. That's my Ficus Benjamina fusion. Been working on it for about 5 or so years. We're going in the right direction now. The fusion is more or less accomplished or close to it. Now just working on structure and growth and health and that type of thing. and I'll rearrange some of those aerial roots next time I repot. Please like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and you'll see updates on this and some other trees that I've got. Thank you for watching. All done. Just kidding. I don't like that leaf. I don't like that one either. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.